Hi, I'm Mallory, and I wanted to make a video to explain my journey to raw veganism because it has made me feel so amazing. And I'm just really grateful to have had all of the little seeds planted throughout my life to lead me here. And I think that I've always been like building up to this and like leading up to this, and I knew that there was something that I was going toward, and I honestly think that this is it. I'm very convinced that all of the times when I thought like, what am I, driving to? I just anyway. I wrote down a bunch of notes last night because I didn't want to leave anything out. I probably will leave things out anyway. So this video doesn't get too long, but I don't know. I just think it's interesting to hear people's stories, and I like watching stories from other vegans and raw vegans, like how they started this lifestyle. And I really like hearing about the why too, and you'll probably end up hearing some of that today, but I think that I will save that for another video because I think that I will probably get too in depth in too deep. So yeah. Okay, so the first thing that I remember, the one thing that I think is important to reflect on is that when I was a teenager, I had a really amazing sense of intuition. And I really enjoyed being a teenager because I felt very clear-minded, and I just felt very joyful. And yeah, so knowing how it feels to be really clear-minded and joyful in your life, I think motivates you to get back to that. Like if you know how it feels and you love the way it feels, then later you're always going to be striving for that, I think. So I remember when I was a teenager, the first time I felt that like clear-minded joy feeling was when I started going to camp. I went to camp when I was 13, and it was a 2-week camp, and it was in the woods, and it was a fine arts camp, so there was music everywhere. Like literally people would just be sitting in the woods playing their instruments. And I went for theater though, so I just got to play theater games all day. Sorry, my dog's crying. I knew he would do this. Okay, so so I'll try to keep the camp story short, but I just remember like coming home from camp being like, whoa, I do not feel the same that I did before, because I was getting tons of fresh air. I was outside the whole day. I was sleeping in a little cabin that was basically outside, with just screens, and I was getting really good sleep because we went to bed early, I think at like 9:30, and then I think we woke up at like 5, and we had very regular meals, and just all the walking, like the walking was amazing. And I just remember being like, wow, I feel different, like mentally, physically, like in a really good way. And so I think that's important. That's an important foundation to like know what it feels like to feel how we're supposed to feel, clear-minded and super happy. So then knowing how I could feel, like I always was looking for ways to feel that way again. So, and I kept going back to camp every year when I was a teenager. And so I had that feeling kind of reinforced every summer for myself. And so when I was a little bit older, but still a teenager, I would journal on my bed. And another story is when I left for camp the second year, my parents said they would redo my room for me, which is so nice of them. And I told them that I wanted my room to be all white, and my dad said, "No, you have to pick a color. I won't do an all white room." He's an interior painter, and so I picked cranberry. For my ceiling, I said, "Okay, well, I'll have my ceiling be cranberry." And he said, "What?" Okay. So he painted my room white with my ceiling cranberry. It was really tiny. And I used to sit and journal on my bed in my white room with my white furniture. And it was very minimalist. This was like, what year would this have been? Probably 2002 or something. Like, this was before, like, I don't know, minimalism was a real thing. Maybe, I'm sure it was, but it wasn't like a huge mainstream thing. But yeah, I would sit and journal on my bed in my white room with my cranberry ceiling, and I just felt so like clear of mind. And I was at that point like trying to do things like to feel good. Like I would go for walks. And I just loved that feeling. And I honestly, I had like the best intuition. Like I could tell what was going to happen. Yeah, I could read people really well. I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew what to do about problems. As a teenager, when you have problems, it can be really hard. But I just remember being like, oh, I know how to fix this, or like I know what to say to this person. I was really confident, like, and I was pretty smart. Like I was good in school. Yeah. So anyway, so that laid the foundation. I say, trying to be health conscious. I was in dance classes, and our dance teachers would talk to us a little bit about, healthy eating. Okay, let me see what else I wrote down. So skip ahead to college. So in college, I had a roommate who was Seventh-day Adventist, and I think this was a really important part of my journey too. And we lived in an apartment together, so we shared a fridge, and she had a little calendar on her fridge of what she did that was active that day. And she was really into healthy eating. And she taught me about like being Seventh-day Adventist, like why it's important to eat healthy, about eating a lot of beans. And so I was pretty into that. I was like, whoa, okay. So then I used to go to the health food store right by our apartment, and I would buy like frozen food, like just random health foods that were already like, pre-made, but a lot of frozen stuff like veggie burgers and that sort of thing, and like flax muffins. And so yeah, that really laid the foundation also. And then when I was in undergrad still, I remember buying, and I still have the book, The Kind Diet by Alicia Silverstone. And I was, that was the first time I ever read about like raw foodism, because in her book she mentions that she tried to be raw for a while and that it didn't work, she said. And so I think from the get-go I was like, oh, okay, so being vegan is great, but like being raw doesn't work. And so I had that in my brain for a little bit. And then when I was in graduate school, we did anatomy classes with cadaver labs, and I couldn't believe how similar our muscles looked to the chicken that I was trying to like learn how to make for myself when I was in college. So I was right there. I was like, that was actually a huge part of my mind shift. So, and I would talk to people about it. I remember talking to other students about it, being like, isn't that crazy? And people didn't really seem like, oh my gosh, I know, right? But whatever. So anyway, then in grad school, I think when I like started realizing that, I found a book called The Beauty Detox Solution by Kimberly Snyder. And shout out to Kimberly Snyder because I was an avid listener of her podcast. I read all of her books for a good like 8 years at least. So I graduated from college. Well, as I was about to graduate from grad school, I remember making smoothies every morning. I had a little magic bullet, and I would make smoothies with like carrot juice and frozen berries and spinach and a banana. But it was tiny. And so I was like, ooh, I love smoothies. And then Kimberly Snyder talked about making this GGS, the glowing green smoothie. So I remember getting at the time I thought it was a fancy blender, a Ninja blender. And even though she said, you better get a Vitamix. So I knew like one day I'll get a Vitamix. But I got a Ninja blender and I started making GGSs all the time. And I even got a juicer and I used to make her glowing green juice too. So it was definitely one that was like hard to clean and all that. And yeah, so I definitely started feeling like, ooh, this feels really good to eat a lot of greens. And I didn't really know about like eating a lot of fruit, you know. That was way later. So at that time, I lived in our first house that was really close to Lake Michigan, and I used to walk my dog every night and to the beach, and then after that, like beach escapade that was so fun. I would come home and I would cook at like 9 p.m. and then eat dinner at like 10 p.m. And so, I was a young person. I was in my early 20s. And so having our first house and getting all of the kitchen things, I was really excited about learning how to cook really well, and I started to get really into like cooking for like to entertain people and like making really fun kind of fancy food that was really easy but also healthy, as what I thought was healthy. And so I started to sort of become like a foodie. So I was like, I think half of my brain was like a health nut, and then like half of my brain was like a foodie. So it was kind of like this battle within me. I'd be like, oh, I really love to try all the new things and new restaurants, but I also love to make things really healthy. And so then a few years later, we moved to Columbus, Ohio, and that is a food town, let me tell you. So a new restaurant opens every week there. So I was super excited about it, and I got like really into being like a foodie. And I would go get like ice cream all the time, and all the while I'm still listening to Kimberly Snyder, and I'm trying to be vegan a lot of the time, but also like cooking a lot of Martha Stewart living recipes with shrimp in it and salmon and that kind of thing. So yeah, I was kind of like knowing deep down in my heart that I really wanted to be vegan, but also letting the fun of food like just keep slipping back into my life. And that all changed when I had my first baby. So when I had my first baby, I realized that I didn't have time to like do fun food. I didn't have time to cook fun food, and I didn't have time to be like thinking about food all the time. Because I was getting a little bit addicted to food, and then being sleep deprived as a new mom, you get a little bit more addicted to food. And breastfeeding, you get a little bit more addicted to food. And so I kind of felt that like power, that loss of power like within my mind. after I had my first baby, where like the food, the fun food thing wasn't really fun anymore. It was more like torture because all I wanted to do was think about my baby and be like interacting with him the best that I possibly could. But then I would be like thinking about like making cookies and yeah, um, yeah, making fun food and then eating it. So I stumbled upon, you know, being like wanting to be vegan, I stumbled upon the starch solution. And I'm actually really grateful for the starch solution. I know some raw vegans are like, boo, starch solution. And I don't need to do it. I don't want to do it anymore, but I am really glad that I did it because it taught me so much about actually feeling really full and being able to feel really full on just a ton of carbs. And I followed some people that did the starch solution, like Plentiful Kiki and Healthy Emmy, and man, like I learned so much from them. I used to watch their videos while I was pumping at work. You know, I would like clock out and pump, and so also the starch solution helped me to lose the like 15 pounds that I always wanted to lose ever since I was like 25. I always had these like 15 pounds that I was just like, well, I guess I'm stuck with. But I knew deep down in my heart that I wasn't really supposed to be that size. Like, that my body wasn't really super like relaxed being that size. Anyway, so the starch solution showed me what it felt like to like lose weight so easily without even trying, without working out, and feeling really full, like eating a ton of food. And so, yeah, I'm really, really thankful for the starch solution. And while I was doing the starch solution, I still had a green smoothie almost every day. I switched from having the whole glowing green smoothie, which has like 8 ingredients, to having a 3-ingredient smoothie. And it was just spinach, celery, and an orange, and with water. And that always made me feel so good. So I always still had that, you know, going in my mind, that I knew that the greens and just like fresh raw fruit made me feel so good. But I was hooked on my oatmeal in the morning. I ate so many steamed potato, like pressure cooked potatoes, a lot of like Japanese potato, like the purple potatoes and all that. And it really helped me while I was breastfeeding. I'm not gonna lie. um, so yeah, so I thought I had like found, like I'm gonna do the starch solution for the rest of my life, basically, is what I thought. But it was a lot of prep to get my food ready. Like not more prep than like, you know, standard American diet or whatever at all. Probably less than that actually, because it's so simplified and you're not, like I didn't add like very many, usually none at all. I didn't add like spices and stuff to my food. Like I would literally just eat like a plain potato and plain steamed veggies, all like for so many, lunch and dinner all the time. So yeah, I thought I was a diehard starch solutioner. So when I had my first baby, I had a really amazing spiritual experience when I was in labor with him. I had a life review, and it was the most beautiful thing ever. And I could go more into detail about that another time, but I'll just leave it at that. And so I had this like spiritual thing that happened to me, and when something beautiful and spiritual happens to you, you want that again. Like you're like, if you know that that's possible, you're kind of always thinking like, how can I get to that again? So there was another seed that was planted. And then cut forward to having my second baby. After my second baby, I remember feeling very desperate. I think desperate is a good word for it. I was really desperate for energy and joy. I had both of my babies in the winter, like the beginning of winter in Michigan. I live in Michigan. And so it's pretty easy to get postpartum depression when you have your babies in winter in Michigan. And mind you, like I still remembered what it felt like to feel so clear-minded and joyful as a teenager. So yeah, when you know what it feels like to feel amazing, you always want to get back to that. So my baby was born in November, and I remember it was maybe February when I started coming across on my feed Jillian Berry's videos, and they were all about raw veganism, and I was a diehard starch solutioner, so I was like, I'm not watching that. Like, I didn't even want to watch it. I think I was just afraid of, I don't know. And so I remember her videos popping up on my feed and being like, nope, not watching them. Maybe I knew that this was going to be the truth, that that would change everything, but in like the best way. But anyway, so one day I was just like, okay, I'm gonna watch them because she looks so cute and she's so fun to listen to, and I was sold for a lot of reasons, but the two main reasons were she kept talking about the spiritual aspect of it and how it's so easy to feel very spiritual with the raw foods. And then she was also saying that she has so much energy, and she has two kids, and here I am with two kids, and that she doesn't sleep very much. And I was like, yeah, I don't sleep either. And that she's breastfeeding. I'm breastfeeding. And she just beamed with light and energy. So I was like, yep, that's me. I want that. So after watching her videos for a couple months, I decided to try eating grapes just for breakfast instead of my oatmeal, which to me felt like impossible to feel full without my oatmeal. And so I actually bought like a ton of grapes and ate them for breakfast, and I realized that I felt amazing. So then I ate more grapes that day. I went and got more, and I think I was at work and I like clocked out and went and got more, and I ate more grapes for lunch. And then I ended up doing a 3-day grape feast. So I ate grapes for 3 days, and I felt incredible. And I was still breastfeeding at the time. I was a little bit worried about transitioning to raw while I was breastfeeding, but I'm really glad I did it. So this was in the spring of 2022, and so then that summer I started slowly transitioning, and so that spring I started slowly transitioning, and in the summer, oh my gosh, I had so much fun last summer being mostly raw. It was a blast, and but you know, still transitioning, not all raw. And it was a little hard to transition quickly because of breastfeeding, pumping, having 2 jobs doesn't help, and then of course 2 little kids. And so I was still sleep deprived and stressed, and yeah, so skip ahead to January. So I was transitioning for over 6 months at that point. And I decided to do a raw January, and I'm so glad I did. Like, I did all raw the whole January, and I kept my word to myself, and I was on point with it, and it felt so good. I mean, how good can you really feel in January in Michigan though? But I felt pretty good. So the rest of the time after January, I was probably like 90% raw, and it was a little bit tricky because my husband was a little sad that I wasn't eating the same dinner as him and the boys, which is totally understandable. And but I just kept knowing that that was going to be the best thing for me, so I just kept doing it anyway. Yeah, so now I'm probably like 98, 99% raw. It's summer, it's August in Michigan, it's super easy. And it is so joyful and easeful for me to be raw now. And it's so easy to bring fruit to work all day. Like, I don't have to make any food to bring to work. I just bring fruit, or sometimes I have to cut it up, obviously. And then the most work really I do is make my salads, which I find really fun to make, and to buy the things for the salad. Yeah, and I think my husband's really supportive now. He is so supportive with all the grocery shopping. I think he's accepted my rawness now. And it's just working for me. So I just wanted to share, and I hope that is helpful to some peeps. And I will definitely share more. I have so much more to say. And shout out to the person who pushed me to make this video finally. So thanks for watching. See you later.